Okay, let's just dive right in. If you've ever spent hours, I mean hours, mixing a song, you know the feeling, right? The beat is hitting hard, all the instruments sound amazing, but the vocal, it just doesn't feel right. It's either kind of lost and buried, or it sounds like it's just slapped on top of everything else. It's honestly one of the most frustrating things in music production, and it's what separates the amateur mixes from the pro stuff. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the real secrets to getting that professional vocal sound.
This is the big one, isn't it? You've got what you think is a great performance, you've got a decent mic, you're throwing on some EQ and compression just like all the tutorials tell you to, and yet, when you play the whole track, the vocal just disappears. I'm telling you, you are not alone. The problem usually isn't one big thing, but actually a bunch of little details, and honestly, a misunderstanding of what's truly important. And that is exactly what we are going to unpack right now.
All right, Section 1, the Pro Plugin Chain. Let's start where most people look for the answers, the effects, the plugins. Now, knowing how to build a good vocal chain is absolutely a crucial piece of the puzzle, but it's about way more than just, slapping on a random compressor. It's a sequence of tools, and each one has a very specific job to do.
And that brings us to a foundational pro technique, serial compression. Instead of using one compressor to just completely squash the life out of your vocal, pros will use 2, maybe even 3, in a row. Each one is just doing a tiny bit of work. Think of it like a team of people lifting something heavy instead of one person trying to do it all. This multi-stage approach gives you really powerful, super controlled dynamics, but without killing the natural energy of the performance. It's a game changer.
So, what does a modern vocal chain often look like? Well, here's a pretty typical path. You'll often start with a fast FET compressor. Think something like a classic 1176. Its job is to just catch those really fast initial peaks and add a little bit of aggressive character. Then you move into a subtractive EQ to clean up any mud or weird frequencies. After that, you might hit it with a second, different style of compressor to just glue everything together and smooth it out even more. And finally, a multi-band compressor can act like a really smart EQ, clamping down on any harshness only when it actually pokes out.
When it comes to EQ, there are really 2 schools of thought. And you know what? The pros use both. First, you have subtractive EQ. Think of this like being a surgeon. You're carefully cutting out the stuff you don't want. The most common move here is to find that muddy, boxy sound, usually somewhere between 250 and 750 Hz, and just pull it down. Then you have additive EQ. This is more like being a painter. You're adding color and vibe, maybe boosting the high end a little bit above 8K to add that expensive sounding air and sparkle.
Okay, Section 2, crafting vocal space. So we've shaped the vocal, it sounds tight and clean. Now we have to place it somewhere in the mix. Most people's first instinct is to just grab a reverb plugin, but that can turn into a muddy mess really, really fast. So let's explore how to create that feeling of depth without all the clutter.
So here's the classic dilemma. You put a reverb on the vocal, and when you listen to it solo, it sounds gorgeous, right? But then you put it back in the busy mix, and suddenly all that reverb is just building up mud in the low mids, and it's fighting with the very vocal it's supposed to be helping. So a fantastic alternative is something producer Izzy calls the 2-delay trick. You use really short stereo delays, you don't sync them to the tempo, and you make them slightly different. What this does is create a sense of width and ambience on the sides of your mix, leaving the center totally clear and open for that lead vocal to punch right through.
And seriously, the results just speak for themselves. This one simple shift in thinking, moving away from just reverb and trying stereo delays instead, can be a total, absolute game changer. You get all the depth and space you want with none of the clutter.
But what if you really want that classic, washy reverb sound? I get it. Well, then you have to use this essential pro technique, sidechaining your reverb. You put a compressor on your reverb channel and you key its input to the main vocal. And when you do this, something magic happens. Whenever the vocalist is singing, the reverb automatically ducks down and gets out of the way. Then, in the empty spaces between the words, it swells back up. You get all the vibe with none of the mud. It's awesome.
Section 3, ethereal textures. So once the fundamentals are all handled, now we can get creative. Effects aren't just for fixing problems, you know. They can be used to build these unique, artistic textures that can really define the sound of a record. Okay, to understand this next trick, we need to quickly talk about formant shifting. This is different from pitch shifting. Pitch shifting changes the actual musical note, like from a C to a D. Formant shifting changes the character or the timbre of the voice. Think about making a voice sound deeper and more masculine, or higher and more feminine, all while it's singing the exact same note. It's wild.
So here's how a Grammy-winning mixer like Thomas Juth uses this to create something called a ghost layer. He'll take some artificial vocal doubles and pan them way out to the sides. Then he'll shift the formant down on one side and shift it up on the other. When you blend these layers subtly underneath the main vocal, you get this incredible ethereal width. It's a texture that you can feel more than you can actually hear.
Okay, we've gone through some seriously powerful plugin techniques. We're talking compression, EQ, cool delays, formant shifting, but what if I told you that obsessing over all these plugins is actually the biggest mistake most people make? What if the real secret to a professional vocal sound has almost nothing to do with your plugin chain at all?
And that brings us to Section 4, the real secret. This is the whole ballgame right here. A pro sound comes from understanding the hierarchy of importance. It's about focusing your energy and your time on what actually makes the biggest impact.
And here it is. This is based on an idea from producer Maddie. Just look at this pyramid. Plugins and effects, they're way down at step 3. They're less important than the recording, and they are way, way less important than the number one element, the performance. So many of us spend all our time on step 3, trying to fix a weak foundation with fancy plugins. But if the performance is lifeless to begin with, no plugin chain in the world is going to save it.
So if the foundation is what matters most, how do we make it absolutely rock solid? Let's quickly go over a few things you can do at the source, during the actual recording, that will make a bigger difference than any effect you could possibly apply later.
Let's start with something incredibly simple but vital: mic distance. If you get too close to the mic, you get that boomy, muddy proximity effect. If you get too far away, the vocal just sounds thin and distant. The sweet spot for most modern pop vocals with a condenser mic is right here, 4 to 6 inches away. Just use your hand to measure it. It's such a simple rule, but it makes a huge difference.
Next up, comping. This just means recording multiple takes of the vocal, and then stitching together the absolute best phrases and words from each one into a single, perfect mega take. And here's the most important rule of all. When you're choosing which parts to keep, listen for emotion and energy, not for perfect pitch. You can always fix a note with tuning software. You cannot fake energy.
This quote from Maddie just says it all. There's a plugin for tuning, for compression, for just about anything you can imagine. But as he says, energy, there's not a plugin for that. That has to come from the source, from the human being behind the microphone.
So, the real secret. It isn't a magic plugin setting or some secret chain that only the pros know. It's a shift in philosophy. It's about recognizing that a great vocal is built, not fixed. It all starts with a passionate performance that's been captured well. The plugins, they're just the final polish. So the question you should be asking yourself isn't, what plugin should I use? It's, am I building on a solid foundation? Refocus your energy there, and I promise you everything else will just fall right into place.